All right, today's video is on mean. Students will find, compare, and interpret the mean of data by scoring 80% on a graded assignment. So first off, we need to talk about what mean is. And mean is basically an average. And so the way that we calculate mean is we take the sum of the data and we divide it by the number of terms. So, in a situation when you're finding the mean or the average of your grade, the way you might do that is you might take all of your graded assignments. So I've got two students' examples here. I've got Tim's graded assignments for this unit and Nick's graded assignments for this unit. Now, both of those are fictional students, so you don't need to worry about all that. But let's go ahead and we can calculate their mean. And again, if you'll remember, I said it's an average, and we get it by getting the sum of the data dividing by the number of terms. So the first thing I'm going to notice right here is that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 graded assignments. So I'm going to use my calculator. This will be a calculator approved assignment, and I'm going to add up to get the sum of all of Tim's assignments. So 100 plus 80 plus 50 plus 50 plus 75 plus 80 plus 100 plus 90 to give me a sum of 625. Since there are 8 items, I'm going to divide that sum by 8, and that's going to give me an average score of 78.125. And typically what you would do in this situation is you would go ahead and you would round it to the nearest whole number. So Tim's graded assignment average would be a 78, okay, which would be a C. When we take a look at Nick's work, Nick did a little bit better. You can see most of his scores are higher, but we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get the sum of all of Nick's scores, 100 plus 80 plus 70 plus 80 plus 100 plus 80 plus 100 plus 100, and his sum is larger, 710, out of 8 assignments. So we're going to go ahead and divide this by 8, and you can see his answer is 88.75. So 88.75 is Nick's average, and again, you would go ahead and round that up so that Nick's average is an 89 or a B. So we know that mean is an average, and we calculate that average by taking the sum of the data and dividing it by the number of terms. And the graded assignments is a good example because the graded assignments lets you know, these are all the scores, but we want one score to represent all the data. And that's what an average is. It's one number that represents a group of data. And, it makes things more concise. And, in a previous video, I brought out some baseball cards. I'm going to bring those out again. I've got two players that were both All-Stars in 1988. And so their statistics are listed on the back of their baseball cards. They're both first basemen. Kent Hrbek played for the Twins, and Will Clark played for the Giants. And if you look very closely, you can see in the statistics here that it shows how many hits, how many at-bats that each player had. And so if you look very carefully here, you can see that Kent had 159 at-bats in 1988. I'm sorry, 510 at-bats and 159 hits. And when I look at Will Clark's data in 1988, he had 575 at-bats and 162 hits. So when we want to compare their average, okay, I actually have their statistics summarized here. Will Clark had 162 hits in 575 at-bats, and his average was listed as .282, which means that if he was to bat 1,000 times, he'd get 282 hits, or he's getting a hit about 28% of the time when he goes to the plate. Whereas Kent Hrbek had less hits than Will, but he did it in less at-bats. And so that average is a better way to compare the two, because you might say, well, Will Clark had more hits, but Kent Herbeck had almost as many hits in a lot less at bats, which is why his average is higher. And I can use the calculator to prove this by taking the data. Remember that the number of hits based on the number of at bats. And so in this case, 162 hits divided by 575 at bats, it's an average of 0.28173991. And we're going to round that. It's going to round to 282. And so when you hear about batting averages, that's actually used by calculating the mean, the average number of hits per at bat. It's a ratio. All right, so to have a better understanding of mean, if you look at this example, this is a group of 6 friends who all went to an arcade, and you can see that John has more quarters than anybody and Cheryl has less quarters than everybody. But if they wanted to share, they can make it so that each of them could have the same amount of quarters. And so we can figure that out by adding up the total number of quarters. So you can see John has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Lisa has 3. Miguel has 4. Matt has 5. Cheryl has 2. And Jean has 4. That's a total of 24 quarters. If we divide that among 6 friends, that equals 4. And so it balances out. But if you wanted to actually see the balance, it would be as if John gave one of his quarters to Lisa, and John gave another quarter to Cheryl, and Matt gave a quarter to Cheryl. And that's why it balances out. And the idea of mean is it's kind of a summary of all the numbers grouped equally. So we're going to go ahead and just see the school's definition. It says that the mean of a data set is the sum of the data divided by the number of data values. So in this example, 8, 5, 6, and 9 are the numbers. And to calculate the mean, you would add up 8, 5, 6, and 9 to get 28. Because there are 4 terms, we would divide by 4 to get 7. Now, I put a little stamp here, calculator approved assignment, to let you know that as you do the work on today's assignment, you may use a calculator. That is permitted. You don't have to, but you may. What you may not do is play guessing games on my assignments. We've talked about this before. I've sent several messages. Students who are getting very low scores on their assessments or their assignments are making it very clear to me that they're not actually watching the video or not actually doing the work. So I expect, my assignments have been very short. I do expect you to actually do them and not guess through them. So here's an example. It says the table shows the number of text messages sent by a group of friends for 1 week. What is the mean number of text messages sent? Now this is similar in format to what you're going to get on your assessment today. You'll see there are 4 choices, and any one of those could be the correct answer, but the only way you can prove it is by adding up all the data and dividing that data by 7. And so you can see that if I was to do this on my calculator right now, it would not be hard to do. All I've got to do is clear my calculator, type in 120 plus 95 plus 101 plus 125 plus 82 plus 108 plus 90 and get 721. And then I would divide that 721 by 7 terms, and there's my answer of 103. And so the goal here is for you actually to solve the work and not just to select the answer you think is correct. All right? So here's a situation where we would compare means, and this is much like what we did with Will Clark and Kent Herbeck, where we're comparing the data to see who's got the higher average, or in this case, the higher amount of rainfall. So we look at this double bar graph, and it shows the monthly rainfall in 2 different cities. It doesn't say which city they are, but they're color-coded. It's a little hard to see in my picture, but if you go in your textbook in this chapter, chapter 9, you'll be able to find this exact graphic. And you can see that in some months, like February, they had about the same amount of rain total during the whole month. But in January, City 2 had more rain. And in December, City 1 had more rain. So it's really hard to compare unless you get an actual average. And so what you could do is add 3.5, 2.2, 1.9, 2.1, 2.5, and 3.4 to get the sum of City 1's rain and divide it by 6 months to get an average. And then do the same thing with City 2. And you can see once you calculate that average, you can justify that City 1 had more rainfall on average. All right? All right, that's all we have for today's lesson. Make sure that you complete the assignment.